Hey, folks, welcome back to our second installment of our ERP Circle of Excellence program. That is a joint project that brings together Peter Jekyll from HandsFree ERP, Wayne Sadin, who is CIO of PriceSmart, Kenny Mulliken, who is CIO of Paragon Films, and me, John Seifert. So nice to be with you again. Now, this joint project is not only these wonderful practitioners that we have here in HandsFree ERP, it is also done with Community Summit North America and Dynamics Communities, where the four of us, as well as some others, are going to be available in our Circle of Excellence ERP Lounge. That's going to be right on the show floor. We're going to be there, as well as others, to help you through some of the big projects and big stuff that you're trying to work through with your ERP projects. We are not selling anything in that environment. We are actually just here to shoot the breeze with you, talk to you, maybe give you a tip, some advice, some tricks, those sorts of things that help you through the big processes that you're trying to manage through as you're working through your ERP strategy. Okay, in this episode, we are going to break down something kind of fun, actually, and that is the ability to cut through some of the hype, some of the noise, some of the buzz that you hear around ERP systems today. They're the greatest thing since sliced bread. They're super easy to implement. They will, transform your company overnight, and all these sorts of things are a lot of some of the hype and the noise that we hear around this stuff. Wayne, I'm going to kick off with you if you don't mind, sir, because everywhere we look, there are all of these success stories that you see out there. Hey, here's the greatest success story ever for this ERP project, that ERP project. A lot of times they're kind of hyped and they're selling the promise of, sort of what can be without really outlining how to get there, and what those steps are and all those sorts of things. How do you tell the difference between some of these things?
Well, what is the saying? If a marketer's moving their lips, they're lying. I don't want to put that kind of brush on it, but you've got to get through the success stories. And actually, I learn more from the failure stories than the success stories. I want to know what projects failed and why, because that tells me what not to do going forward. The way I built my model of implementing ERP included putting everything in the budget. Who puts budget costs for travel? Who puts budget costs for organizational change management? Who puts a contingency? We talked about that in the last episode. Contingency for me is a measure of what I don't know. So when I go with a contingency number one, I don't bury it in the project.
Yeah.
I have a line at the bottom that says contingency. And the last ERP I did, the board had a contingency of their own and the CFO had a contingency of his own. And we had contingency on top of contingency on top of contingency, because when you go to the board, that is your number. So that's a very important thing. How do you cut through the hype? You talk to other companies. You talk to people who've done it. You talk to Kenny, who just went through a project. You interview your partner. Look, do not just accept the partner that shows up one day. Partners knock on my door all the time. I am the greatest partner for vendor ABC in the world. Oh, okay. Come on in. Let's give you millions of dollars. No, vet them, validate them, interview them, go to their office. It sounds crazy in this day, but now that COVID's over, get on a plane and go to the vendor's office if they have one. Obviously, not everybody has one. Meet them in your factory. I'm meeting with a vendor next month. We're meeting in a warehouse. Why? Because we're doing a warehouse automation project. They said, come to our office. I said, no, come to my warehouse.
Nice.
Impress the warehouse people. And then we got a deal, because that's the people who are going to use your software. So you've got to get from the ivory tower, here it is, we know how to do it, to show me. And that means investing in a partnership. Again, I'm working on another project, and I've got two vendor contenders. And I sent one of my data people who knows where the data is and how it's used, and he's spending 2 days with each of two vendors. Our time flying to their office to sit with them for 2 days and say, here's the data we have. Here's the data we can give you. What can you do with that data to tell me if this is a project that will work in my environment or I have to do something else? We're investing time up front to validate the vendors. This is not requirements we've let the contract. This is deciding who we want to hire. And so invest the time and the effort up front to understand. And go to the trade shows, go to the community summit and talk to people and say, what vendors have worked with you? What partners to those vendors do you want to use? What help do you need? This is where you learn from people with the actual scars. And there's no substitute for people who have tried and failed, gotten up, and done it again successfully. Work and invest before you sign the contract.
Well, it's such a great way to talk about that, Wayne, because it's while you're lying at the front end of, if marketing person's moving their lips, they're lying, right? That's probably a little bit of an overstatement, but I think that became a perception because of all of the we're the best thing since people learned how to slice bread sort of positioning and that sort of stuff that a lot of these organizations, especially in the ERP category, had been doing and have done. Peter, anybody who's been in the weeds of these projects before, like you, like Wayne, like Kenny, knows that the majority of these projects are actually not successful. They're maybe not full failures, but they are definitely not on scope of work that are put in place or against requirements that had been initially set. How do you recommend folks like Wayne and Kenny decipher some of this noise that's out there and those sorts of things when these are the realities?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think the first time I stood up in front of a room of people, Kenny was actually in the audience, it was probably about 8-9 years ago. And I said that based on 3 simple criteria, on time, on budget, and on spec, meaning delivering what's in a proposal, there are no successful ERP projects. And I expected to be booed off the stage, but it was interesting. It ended up to a very long discussion, and what's been mostly a passion of looking at why these projects do jump off the rails. And one of the things is that this software has to be continuously sold on higher and higher expectations from the year before. So one of my favorite commercials recently, an executive's riding in the back of a limo, and he's jumping out to attend some Broadway show in his tux, and he holds up his phone, and there's a red button in the middle of the phone, indicating that something's wrong on one of his manufacturing lines. And he drills down one step, and then he hits another green button, and all of a sudden, overseas somewhere in a manufacturing plant, one line stops running and the other line begins to run. And so this is the kind of thought process that marketing folks try to attract, that emotional buyer at the C level. The thing that people never realize is that there's 2 or 3 companies in the world that ever have the time, money, and the resources to be able to get to that highest level of effectiveness. Most people just want to print checks, right? And so these systems are sold on these levels of impossible, functionality, and nobody really looks down in the boiler room. Everybody is selling to the boardroom, but nobody's looking down into the boiler room of what does that poor guy need that's shoveling coal into the steam engine. And that's the biggest issue, is that these systems oftentimes are sold at an emotional level at the C level, while we pay lip service to what all the requirements are for everybody, that's shoveling the coal, but we don't actually really address that and understand that the victory is printing checks, not having that, metric show up on your iPhone that allows you to change things on the fly. And the real life example that we're all living in our Microsoft industry today is the inordinate amount of marketing that's going out to the Great Plains user base that says they should upgrade their Great Plains to Business Central. It's not an upgrade, it's a reimplementation. So there's tremendous amount of confusion specifically around marketing there that appeals to someone that says, oh, you've done 10 upgrades with Great Plains. You know what that's like. Somebody comes in and over the weekend, you've got that new system that's up and running. And now you're going to take your Great Plains and you're just going to move it over to Business Central. And the thought process is, oh, gee, it's another weekend of a consultant coming in and moving stuff over. When in reality, it's a complete reimplementation. So it took a little bit more than I wanted to there, but it's that, perception of what we're trying to sell to the emotional buyer, and that perception of their, versus the reality of what actually happens in a day-to-day process.
And I think a key point there, Kenny, is, they're trying to, a lot of that marketing is, here's why, here's how great it can be, here's how seamless it's going to work, here's how at a push of a button when you're getting out of your limo at the Broadway show, you can mitigate risks on in one manufacturing line and push them over to another one, right? Maybe that works in the metaverse, right? And those sorts of things. Not really how real business works today, right? Is key there. And Kenny, when you think about Peter's point there of, hey, selling to the emotional boardroom as opposed to paying attention to what's actually happening in the boiler room when you're shoveling the coal in, which, quite frankly, are the users, right? They are the users that are actually utilizing these systems inside mid-market and enterprise companies. As a CIO, how are you navigating through all of this noise and the like? And, what do you suggest for folks?
Yeah, I really like Peter's example about the push button because it's so true. That is at the very highest level, the hype that you see is about, think about how easy this is going to be. And they always focus in on something that a CEO would care about, like right there on the front screen, you're going to see this dashboard that tells you everything you need to know about your company. And the truth is, I bet you any ERP system, you could get it to that point where it does that. That really isn't a differentiator. In fact, I would venture to say that most ERP systems could be made to work for most companies and most types of companies. So that isn't even necessarily a differentiator. What it kind of comes down to is that you need to be able to understand, what does the system do, and how does it work? So those are the kind of things to drill into, is the hype for not just the product, but the hype for the vendor themselves. Is this vendor someone that's going to be able to get me there? And that's the thing where you really have to rely on other people. I mean, things like Dynamics communities, where we have the ability to talk to people and really find out, oh, you use them? What did you run into? Be honest. Tell me all of the nitty gritty. I don't want to just know how great they are. I want to know what the challenges were and how you overcame them, and those type of things. But one thing that I think people don't understand is that the level of customizations that are required to make ERP systems work the way you really need to. So when you ask about a particular function and say, can it do this? And the vendor's salesperson says, yes, it can do that. And in fact, it may be able to do that out of the box. Great, out of the box. It's not even going to require customization. But what that doesn't really tell you is, what would it take to do it that way out of the box? It may be that, sure, you could put an ERP screen in front of somebody in the shop floor, and they could type through and they could work through the process of planning and producing the product and the warehousing and everything, but it's not scalable. It would take people doing this kind of thing and typing away and using screens and pointing and clicking for hours to do things which are supposed to be automated and should just be happening very, very quickly, thousands of times per hour. And so just saying, yep, the system does that, and finding out, but how would it do it and meet the scale and needs of my company? That's the real disconnect. And that's the thing that requires, as both Wayne and Peter mentioned, you need to see it in action. You need to say, show me. I want to see how somebody else is doing this. And you can't be in a hurry. If you're in a hurry to get your ERP project started, you're going to miss so much compared to if you can take the time and say, can we find a company that's almost just like ours that's willing to let us come and see how they did it? How does it work on the shop floor? Let's get our shop people down to their shop and look at them and say, show us how this is. And is it really easy? And how does it work? And let me, imagine how that is. That's going to get you so much past the hype, because it's not so much about can it do it and can it save you billions of dollars or those kind of really broad things, and saying, what's the experience going to be like? And is this going to slow down our processes, or at least keep them the same, if not make them even a little bit faster or a little bit better? And that is not easy to get to. That takes a lot of skill. And like I mentioned in our first session, that's a skill that I didn't personally have, nor did the people in my company have. And so we really have to rely on third-party experts who've done this way more times than me, people like Wayne, people like Peter, that have been there so many times that they can say, oh, hey, don't forget about this and take a look at that. And here's what you're going to need to get there. And to me, that's how you get past the hype, is it's by talking to other people and finding out from somebody who really knows the answer. And then you can compare that and say, okay, here's what the vendor said, put that in this column. Here's what I was able to gather. And then somewhere in the middle is what would our reality be?
Really great stuff, Kenny, and that show don't tell aspect, right, is really where the rubber meets the road in that environment. Doing that to Wayne's earlier point, with the vendor actually coming to the warehouse and showing the people that are actually managing the warehouse how this technology works, how it improves process, that kind of thing, and then taking it to the for user by user level. To your other point, Kenny, of actually meeting people at a community summit North America on dynamicscommunities.com, whatever, where you can actually get the real deal, right? By talking to them truthfully about how they've worked with other organizations and the like. And seeing it in practice, right? Show, don't tell. And then to Peter's point, and this is an oft heard one at Community Summit North America last year, and will be again this year as we're together, is that that issue of organizations that have run their businesses on Great Plains software for a long time, right? Mm-hmm. And there are some, very large organizations that are very comfortable with their on-premise GP implementation and the upgrades that they continue to do. Now, will they get differentiated functionality with a business central or a finance and operations or a finance and supply chain? Sure, there will be some things that are going to be differentiated in there. Could it enable a level of modernization? It can, right? However, if that Great Plains software that's running on premise at your organization is achieving your business needs, that's the thing you have to remember, right? That's the biggest requirement is it doing what it needs to do? Because these companies are not in the ERP business. They are in, the retail business. They're in the sports business. They're in the manufacturing business or what have you. And that's the most important thing to realize, not what everybody's telling you the Armageddon's going to be with a platform and all those sorts of things. Gang, great feedback, great insights. Everybody, again, as I mentioned at the front end of this, we're going to be together at Community Summit North America, October 15th to the 20th in Charlotte, North Carolina. Hope you can join us. We'd love to have you come in and spend a little time with us in the Circle of Excellence ERP Lounge that's going to be right there on the show floor, where we can break down some of these issues specific to your organization, help you out wherever we can, and hopefully make some new friends and build some new relationships. On our next episode, we are going to talk through a little bit of this on-premise versus cloud ERP reality that many organizations are going through today. So please stay tuned in. Can't wait to see you next time. Take care, Kenny, Peter, and Wayne. Thanks for the great insights. Adios, everybody.